Okay, this video is to celebrate Saint Cyril and Methodius. They are the apostles to the Slavs to Eastern Europe. They're brothers who brought the gospel to Eastern Europe, including Russia. When they first went out to Eastern Europe, they were born, by the way, in Thessalonica in Greece, and they were scholars. They were well versed in the classics of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And they went to Eastern Europe, and they didn't have a language in Eastern Europe at that time. This was in the 800s, and they developed the language. It was first called the Glagolitic language and Slavonic language, and it's now known as the Cyrillic alphabet after Saint Cyril. And they translated the Bible and the Gospel into Cyrillic for the Eastern European peoples. And nowadays you'll have different Eastern European languages, but they'll be based on the Cyrillic alphabet. And what they did was quite extraordinary, and they're still highly celebrated in Eastern Europe. And I'll show you some pictures, and I'll give you some more history of it because it's rather interesting. So here's another painting of St. Cyril and Methodius. You know, the idea of inventing the Cyrillic alphabet for the Slavic peoples and bringing the gospel to the Slavic peoples. Okay, a couple more things about them. Yeah, so this is when they lived in the 800s. They're known as the apostles to the Slavs. Their translation of the Bible and the liturgy into the Slavic language, which they invented, helped to unify much of Eastern Europe. And basically, you look at the world today, it's pulling apart in two directions. The rich people of the world want to bring back slavery, and they go by what you would call atheistic Darwinism. That basically the poor people, other than the real rich, are just a bunch of animals, talking monkeys that don't deserve anything. They should be poor, not own anything, and just keep their mouth shut and obey, and there's too many of them. Versus the, sort of Christian mentality of abundance that, we've been able to develop things pretty well up until now, and we can continue to do so, and there's plenty of room for everybody, and that is the truth, okay? This was also part of the idea that the Bible and the Mass should be available in the common vernacular languages. And this helped to make people literate. They didn't even have a language. How could they be literate before the 1800s when St. Cyril and Methodius went out to Eastern Europe? And it also is a reminder that the Bible was available in the vernacular and not just Greek and Latin long before Martin Luther. In those days, most people in Western Europe, if they could read their vernacular, they could also read in Latin. So they didn't need to make the Bible in other languages for the most part. And this wasn't easy for St. Cyril and Methodius. There were a lot of factional issues in that day. It was sort of after Charlemagne the Great, had the Carolingian Empire, if you will, and it started falling apart after the 800s after he died. Largely the Western Europe separating into the Franks, the French, and the Germans, what we would now call Germany or Prussia and all that. Plus there was other groups out there. There were still pagan barbarians and other groups. And it wasn't difficult. Methodius was in prison for 3 years for his work, and they had to go back and forth to the Pope and whatnot. There's a whole lot of drama behind the scenes. We won't go into that. I'm going to show you some more pictures here. I'll give you a quick prayer to St. Cyril and Methodius. Oh, also to mention, Pope John Paul II from Poland, he declared them to be patron saints of Europe. And he sort of said the Christian church should breathe with both lungs, meaning both, at that time, he said, the European church, Western and Eastern. Okay, here's a prayer to St. Cyril and Methodius. St. Cyril and Methodius, you both gave your lives to the service of God. You served with zeal, creativity, and much determination. Please pray for me that God may use me to become an instrument of his saving grace. To those in need, bringing the good news in ways in which they can relate. St. Cyril and Methodius, pray for me. Jesus, I trust in you. Okay, so now I'll show you some pictures. So here's a procession, and there's tons of these processions all over Eastern Europe. And I can tell you, I went to Catholic school for part of my education. Partly I went to public schools, and it was a disaster. There's tons of kids doing drugs, having, X, Prego in junior high, fighting in junior high, all kinds of craziness, all right? Then you go to the Catholic school, 0 people using drugs. There were 0 fights. The adults were in charge, not this modernism chaos. Okay, so anyways, why am I telling you that? Because the Catholic Church, it organized life for the people. There were sports teams. You'd go to the sports team, the football game on the weekend, the basketball game on the weekend, or whatever sport it was. And then there were feast days. There was Mass. We knew all the other kids in the school. We knew all the other families. So there was a strong sense of community. You could easily talk to anybody else in the school or the community. It was just normal to do that. Versus nowadays, people are separated all over the place. When I was a kid, you didn't ask your parents for a play date, for a ride to your friend's house. You just walked out the door and knocked on your neighbor's door, and there were kids all over the place. We could play entire sporting games just by knocking on a couple doors. We'd pick teams and play sports when I was a kid. Nowadays, you've got to drive a couple miles away and have it arranged through the parents for kids to see each other. So anyways, there's processions like these all over the Christian world, and these types were St. Cyril and Methodius, especially, of course, in Eastern Europe. And they're also common in the Polish communities and other Eastern European communities that exist in the United States. There was a big move through secular humanism to break apart those communities, and that was a bad thing. It's good for neighborhoods to have an ethnic flair to them. It helps the people to form a community and get along with each other. All over Eastern Europe, there's statues of St. Cyril and Methodius, and this is pretty much how they're typically symbolized, with their development of the Cyrillic alphabet and with the Bible to bring the gospel to the Slavs. Here's one cross I thought was kind of interesting. This is a Celtic cross with the round shape on it. It's more sturdy. It kind of holds the transverse part of the cross together. The Latin cross is just the cross itself, but the circular part that looks kind of like the sun makes it a Celtic cross. And of course, I love the Celtic cross as a symbol because my father's from Ireland. Okay, it's a beautiful thing. All right, there's also tons of churches all over Eastern Europe in honor of St. Cyril's and Methodius. This is in Moravia of the Czech Republic. They're all over the place in Poland, in Russia, and all these other Eastern European countries. And I can tell you there's lots of them in the United States as well, where you have a large percentage of people of Slavic origins. Okay, the churches do a lot of good for a community. So anyways, hopefully America will recognize the idea of a Bible-based worldview that man is created in the image of God, therefore part divine, and he should be treated kindly and not abused and lied to. It's either that or atheistic Darwinism, which means the powerful people can do whatever they want, survival of the fittest, and I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a big public, and they want the public to be shrunk in size, and they want it to be slaves. So I think I'd rather be created in the image of God.